Alright, hopefully I've done all my sound checks and this will work. I have about an hour-ish until my husband starts to serve the meal for the day. It's New Year's Eve, so we're doing like some Chinese, or is it Korean? Some Chinese, Korean, whatever. Barbecue on the table. It's awesome. Anyway, so I have actually like very recently gone through a number of my my old vlogs, and I was reminded of certain things. And I have been on this sort of lifelong search for answers of sorts for specific conundrums. And one of these things specifically is referred to as the monad, or just monad. And it's always been a point where I never have a satisfactory definition, concept, or how do I put it, like to trace it back to its origin and why and what it's for. And it's a very ancient concept, and yet so monad and cybernetics, which come from ancient philosophy, probably even pre-Socratic or Pythagorean, and heading into the more modern time periods, they also chose, including like the quote-unquote Enlightenment period, they all chose to, or elected to, intentionally use the same verbiage for also very interesting concepts and understanding or perception of aspects of reality or functionality. And this gets into the concept of math. And I have been testing various GPTs, meaning like AI chatbots, for several years now, and they have frequently been inadequate, frequently been unable to satisfy me. And I know it's very vogue right now to point out things like AI chatbot psychosis or GPT psychosis issues. There's even a video, which I haven't even gotten to watch today yet because I just don't have time, talking about how ChatGPT is becoming Facebook-like or social media-like, which I haven't even watched, so maybe I'll reflect upon that later. But this video specifically is going to get into topics that no one else is getting into. And for the record, it is now 3:01 p.m. on December 31st, the year 2025, a quarter of a century, actually past a quarter of a century, into this new millennium, the dark millennium. And for all of, well, just at least just one person I can specifically think of who berates me, and I have video footage of this too, for thinking that I'm addicted to thinking, and that thinking is bad and evil, and that's my problem. Meanwhile, I'm experiencing very uniquely unusual things that have probably been going on throughout my lifetime. That, and I think I've mentioned this because I watch Third Eye Drops. He and other persons, including like Miguel from Aeon Bytes, will keep bringing up these concepts of like daimon, or the daimona, daemon, this kind of concept, which is strangely similar to Socrates, who had this kind of daimon or guardian angel or genie kind of thing going on. I'm kind of hesitant to conclusion jump or admit that that's what's going on, but I didn't ask for this, and it kind of seems like it. It's not a bad thing though. But throughout my life, I've had various screwy things happen to me. Weird things, strange things. And I had a major uptick of this again. This is, I have, if you go through my channel, there's many instances of me recording and documenting aspects of just weird attacking. Usually it's, well, sometimes it's attacking and it's bad. And then there's the other kind where it just seems to get attention. And it gets into the very uncanny, very weird, because the timing can correlate to things that do not exist within cyberspace, or I was not online, my phone was off, and I was not near any internet technology. But around those time periods, oftentimes simultaneously or just before, I was mentally and internally thinking about something. Or it would be related to certain, or highly correlated to activities online. These things oftentimes, when they're not mean, they have a tendency to really want to grab my attention. And so one such thing, which just recently happened, was actually, let me show it. So on the 29th, I woke up, and I don't know, I think I might have mentioned this in my vlog yesterday. I woke up and my phone was off. I do not sleep with my phone on. And someone or something had tried to get a reset for my password. And this is especially at certain times of the year, there's an uptick in this behavior. That someone does this on an account that is usually specifically named after my public name online, my fursona. And the time was at 9:34. At that specific time, my PC was still off because I was in bed. I have an injury to my leg, so it's a lot of effort just to get up and move from the bed to get dressed and then come here. My phone was not even on, okay? And I didn't even turn my phone on until after 10 a.m. A lot of times, because of my leg injury, I wouldn't say I'm depressed, because I know what depression feels like. But I am bummed out, frustrated, annoyed, grumpy, and cranky in varying degrees of this. I'm not like extremely grumpy. I'm not extremely mad. I'm not like a grump. But I do have an attitude about it. Like, I'm not happy about it, right? And when I turned my phone on and I saw that email notification, I was like, what the heck? So then I went to my old blog and I wrote about it. Not long after I finished writing about it, I had to take a bath, and it's very humbling. I hate it so much. I hate it so much. But in order to take a bath, I need help. And I'm very dependent on help from my husband, and I don't love doing it. So after I went in the bath, which was before 6 o'clock, it was like the end of 6 o'clock, and I believe the last thing that I typed on my blog, let me see if I can pull that up. Let me go here. At that time was sometime around 5 something. So this was the Voldemort thing. Hold on. This was, Yeah, literally when I wrote about it, it was at 5:18 when I published it. And then I published this at 5:19, and then I think I ate something really quick, and then I went into the bath. And by 6:01, because I had my phone with me, which I put on the toilet next to the bathtub. So I had been in the bath, and I was like, washing myself and stuff and bathing, whatever. And then I got this notification on my phone that there was another password thing. Then, on another very weird coincidence, later in the evening, I had actually been on Wayfarer. Here we go. Niantic Wayfarer. And there's a picture of David right here. Freaking David. The timing. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, that's David. I had also been discussing similar topics to Daimon and the strange experiences I've been having. And this was last night. Yesterday. So that was the 30th. I got, here, let me pull it up. I had gone into Wayfair, and I'd had something get rejected, and another thing got approved. So, let me see, can I see that? All right. And somebody or something submitted a Pokestop, which I did not, because I was looking to see if I could do another appeal. I need another platinum medal, and because I fully intend to hit level 80. And then I got this email at 1:16 a.m. and I had just been in Wayfair on my phone, and then I got this notification immediately after I closed the browser on my smartphone. This is not my style. But this location is in Florida, and it's the place where my father has a timeshare that he owns. And let's see if is it in the freaking queue? No, is it in voting? It's gone. Let's see. Oh, maybe it's this one. It is. Oh, absolutely bizarre. I did not appeal this. This is not my style. This is not how I write things. There's only one photo. I always do two. I'm a perfectionist. I know where this is. I know where this location is. See, there's nothing written. I don't do that. Now, it claims 2023 here, but the email says 2025, and at 1:16 last night. And that is really strange. Stranger still, I was chatting with one of my Pokemon Go buddies, and we were talking about things, and it turns out he's not far from this location. Like, it's a bit of a drive, but it's pretty close. I'm not going to say where, and he's actually in Florida right now. What the heck? Yeah. So, anyway, now I'm going to get into maybe just some aspects of this. Is so long. I'm going to Um, so one of these things that I had been, and I know I had vlogged about this, mentioning it this year, maybe a few times, and throughout my vlogging history, career, whatever you want to call it, whatever we're calling it. I don't know what to categorize this stuff as, but I will say this. I was recently going through a number of my old vlogs, as well as video stuff I had recorded, and I set a number of things to private. Oh my god, I just got more subscribers. Okay, that happened. What are the chances? I don't know. But I had gone through a number of my old vlogs and I had set them private, and for reasons, the reasons was for employment reasons. And I was going through some of these, quite a lot of these, because I've been on YouTube since it started, basically. And one of the ones I keep coming to or even looking for, there was vlogs that I remember recording when I was talking about like Descartes, and I pronounced it wrong because it was just like in my 20s. And the one about a human soul, where I was talking about like a human soul. These are some of the VFX stuff I did on my friend's film, who I'm still friends with, but we did have a kerfuffle like in 2018. I don't get punished for doing Pokemon things. You get rewarded for doing Pokemon things. Anything at the behest of, you know, corporations and brands. And that's just fine. Which I also can get ridiculed for. See if I can find some of these. I also have a tendency to really have an affinity for cameras, so I've many times tested out various kinds of cameras and lenses, and I really enjoy doing that, actually. And I'm an animator, so I have all kinds of animation stuff in here. And I used to vlog frequently. It was sort of my way of coping with the screwiness of this reality, because it's so horrible. And I don't know, trends of vlogging and whatever have come and gone, and it was my way of coping with like depression, because this world is absolutely insane. And hopium copium, and going kind of detaching from like new age stuff, and honestly learning quite a number of things through secularism and atheism and anti-theism and whatever. And I value all of these lessons from all the different points of view for several different kinds of reasons. But I don't think there's just one answer that's definitive for anything and everything. And let's see, so a number of things I switched to unlisted rather than private. And I have considered putting these into like a playlist so that, you know, suppose I die, people can access them. Now I do actually have recordings of stuff, which I'm going to not talk about at the moment, of really messed up things that I went through, and I actually do have footage of it. And I have a lot of thoughts on this, and because the nature of it is very private and connected to persons I'm related to, including one who passed away. I have so many thoughts on that, but I'm not going to discuss it at the moment. For personal and privacy reasons, even though, like, I'm not afraid to talk about it. I could definitely talk about it. but I feel that in doing so could cause problems for other persons that may actually honestly be deserved. Having said that, I don't know that I want to do that. That I just feel like, because everything's connected and I could get some serious blowback, especially since I'm not in the wrong and they were. Am I covering up for bad behavior? That's an interesting question. So as this kind of goes back over time, and some of these are still, I guess, set to private, which I haven't actually amended. Yeah, so this gets into like, this is what, 2009. I kind of see like a pattern in my life of this, like, always striving, always trying to do more, always learning, keep going, and this pattern of like, hey, the silver lining around the dark cloud, or forced positivity, or you never know until you try. And I've actually learned a lot regardless of the result, because you can also learn from failure. And at some point, is this the end? Probably skipped over the things did I skip over the things I was looking for? At some point, because I'm not a fatalism person at all, or destiny. And this was kind of like the really horrible realization I had come to, that destiny is bunk, or destiny, fatalism, determinism is a problematic thing. Because if destiny was a thing, or fatalism, or determinism, then why actively bother to do things if it's just fate? Why be good? Or were you just set up to be good? This gets into like a lot of conundrums of like justice, and the judicial system, and things like fairness, compassion, etc. This is kind of like my issue with the toxicity of the New Age community, like big time. And if destiny was a thing, then that would mean that my life was destined or set up and programmed to just be a failure. And that no matter what I did, it didn't matter, because I would always be set up to fail. This gets into like weird like concepts of like soul trap, matrix, reality, reincarnation, archonic concepts, etc. And other things like an exercise in futility, which is like a mathematician way of talking, or rocket science way of talking. Like, why bother doing certain things if you're doing certain things and even trying different things, different approaches? Why bother if it's always going to fail, or something's going to sabotage it? And then another thing is, because I know so many people who are self-sabotagers, who have a fear of success or fear of responsibility. That's a thing. That is definitely not my thing. And then New Agers imposing their thoughts onto me with fervor, that you expect to fail, even though I don't, but probably they do. Or they impose this and project this onto other people. There is not just one size fits all for everything and everybody. But oftentimes when you get into things like gaming theory, where it's like there's things coded into the reality, and then you can kind of, at times, so if you get into like Taoism, mind over matter sort of concepts, other times for certain things and certain reasons, or even like reality transurfing, like Vadim Zealand, why is it that sometimes it works and other times it doesn't? Why is it that some people have an ease with it and others? And to me, I would say that there are different rules for different persons. different personalities or different individuals. And if you've read like Robert Monroe's stuff, even he kind of will talk about like what seems to be like different categories or levels of different beings. Because I think it's pretty obvious at this point that we're not physical beings actually, but we're non-physical consciousness beings stuck inside of these, what oftentimes is referred to as meat suits. I would refer to it as like molecule, third-dimensional molecule structures. Or we could go the Star Trek route of ugly bags of mostly water. Which I remember referencing one time on Facebook, and then David Biedny always would use this phrase from that Star Trek episode. I don't know what happened to that video. I had this video, so I always go through this issue where I can't find it. I should have prepared, but I'm running out of time. Do I have a search feature here? Is it gonna work? There we go. There it is. This is from 2012. I know I've discussed these same topics many times over, and this is what it is to actually be a philosopher, to actually use logic and introspection and reflection and so on. And my voice is so different.
And more along the lines of thinking that the chemicals...
Also, I can tell just by, like, this is one of the things I just... It's maybe a vanity thing, probably. My forehead... I've always had a issue with my forehead being so freaking large, because I'm oftentimes referred to as a egghead or a know-it-all, while simultaneously also being told that I'm stupid, because I have certain quote-unquote learning disabilities, which I just find super laughable. But my forehead is so large now, and I used to think, like, is this genetic, right? Or is the hairline just receding? Because that's what people usually say. Or did my frontal lobe just keep growing because I'm always thinking, because I'm always in my mind? My father's forehead is also very large, and it has gone to the back. And so let's qualify this regarding thinking. I would also refer to as rumination, reflection, introspection, and even daydreaming. Are you active at doing this? Because I definitely am. I know my father definitely is. And if you're a person who suffers and struggles with depression, then you're definitely also in your head and your thoughts and reflecting and feeling. So is my frontal lobe growing? Is my frontal lobe expanding over my lifetime? Because my freaking forehead is so big compared to at this time. In this video recording of me, and at that time I thought my forehead was too large. I don't know. I don't have an answer for this, but I do know that bones, your bones are not stuck in a specific shape, and they can warp. Like people who get paralyzed on one side of their face, even in an elderly age, because the muscles start to hang, can start to warp the bone structure, even with a lot of more rigid calcium in it, which speaks volumes to me about so many things, including a very common practice or popular thing that people do called mewing, or what is it called? Orthotropics. You can look into that. It's very popular in what's called looks maxing, which is something I've looked up a ton, not to come off as super vain or anything, but whatever, you can judge. I'm so vain, I'm so evil. And you can see
produced within the body are not necessarily the cause of the emotion or the emotional feeling, the emotional...
I oftentimes would do like video blogging as to try and it's a method of like, because I didn't have anyone to talk to who I could talk with, and so I would just let my stream of consciousness come out, which is something that I think Sigmund Freud frequently did. And you can do it by typing, you can do it by handwriting, and you can, do it by dictation or, recording the audio or video. And I noticed that oftentimes, because I'd have all these like conflicting pent up thoughts and feelings, like because the world was so insane and it kept wanting me to think the things or that I was wrong, especially in social media or various leanings and stuff. When I would talk about these things out loud and I would vlog about it, I felt a lot better. And when I watch it back, I was oftentimes struck with this experience of surprise and relief and shock, and that everything I said made total sense and made more sense than the bullshit in the media and the news and the common zeitgeist of certain things. And one of the persons I liked to confer with quite a lot with was David Biedny. And it's interesting how I've gone back to some of my old journals and found stuff that I wrote down that he told me that I had forgotten, and actually made me feel pretty good. And so I've had this lifelong search for trying to really wrap my head around this concept of the monad or a monad or monads. And ironically, there was this weird freaking video that showed up. It's very AI by this channel Eye of Gnosis, because I had the whole weird situation with Wayfarer last night. And these are the kinds of AI slop, weird, mashed together things that have really stupid comments, probably by bots. And it's always this weird, like, Judeo-Christianized, westernized version of this is the only way to look at reality through these guys. Because, of course, I'm so racist to white men, because that's definitively who I am. When you want to criticize me and you don't have anything to say about my actual points, it's just, let's just smear Candace as sexist to white men and racist to white men. Because that's who I am. And then, of course, because, I'm using the persona Black UniGryphon, I'm low consciousness. Right, because you're so spiritual and super holy for only eating plants, even though that definitively puts you in the category of prejudiced and sectarian towards organisms that don't have eyeballs, that are not animals, because they're not cute and cuddly, such as plants and fungus and bacteria and other things. Oh, you can eat those and destroy those and harm those and whatever, and somehow they don't have feelings because somehow my other echo chamber of vegans and vegetarians want to cherry pick stuff to fit their biased conclusions and conclusion jumping and logical fallacies because they don't have nerves, and therefore only nerves are evidence of pain response, even though there's so much data on plants having pain responses as well as behaviors, especially within the root systems. And that's not even getting into the whole connectivity of things like mycelia and bacteria in the ecosystem of the soil, as well as the watershed. But I digress. It's not like you actually study permaculture, because I did. But whatever. Anyways, so these... It's like nobody's been talking about monads at all, except for me. And then out of nowhere, now we're repurposing stuff. Another one is Heather. Heather has been talking about the Toros structures and these other very philosophical, conceptual things. And now it's like it's being repurposed for other weird AI slop to, I don't know, or pop culture, which wasn't really there before she was talking about it. Like, people just weren't really talking about these things, and now she is, and now I'm seeing these things in all kinds of stuff, right? And whatever. I'm not gonna link this video, but when it comes to like these GPTs, these AI chatbot things, I have been testing them and I absolutely hated so many of them. Resented them. There's things like quote unquote the Turing test, and there's so much re-critiquing of these things now, and there's so many different sides, and there's so many people who are so emotional, reactive, visceral, vicious, programmed, and then the responses are not rational, they're emotional and conditioned. Pavlov, Pavlov, Pavlov. And I have been many times on the receiving end of the brunt of these very angry, hate infused attacks, including by my kid, a friend of mine, and other associates of mine, and also shunned and ghosted as a result of the AI thing. Whereas in the groups of people that I've been associating with for 2+ years at this point, and there are divides in that because many of these people are in these like new age categories, and just I am so not a new age person. I was new age, let's qualify this, new age in the late 90s, Y2K in the early 2000s, very different by the mid Obama era, completely different. Okay. And they have a very rigid, dogmatic way of thinking, and because a lot of the soul trap, reincarnation, matrix, soul trap stuff, they tried to smear us, they tried to get rid of us, and I give so much credit to Wayne Bush, Mark from Forever Conscious Research, Howdy McCoskey, and a number of other ones. Another one is the Overwatch Project, because they're really put the thought into it, put the scrutiny into it, put the logic into it, put the questioning into it, questioning the axioms, especially of the New Age or religion, as well as the materialism stuff. They realized, because I remember early in 2023, the attack, the smearing, the pettiness, the posturing, peacocking, ridicule, just completely void of logic, the sophistry of it all. Just trying to stamp it out, smear it, suppress it, etc. Became very obvious that it was actually promoting it. That by mid to late 2023, all of a sudden the individuals, and I could name names, all of a sudden they start repurposing the topic, and then by late 2023, going into 2024, these people who had been decrying it and smearing it and slandering it, now we're experts on it. And all of the content, because you're crowd surfing, now it's all dependent on your bottom line, which is money, which already shows a major conflict of interest. Pretty much shows that you're not serious. You lack integrity, you lack accountability, and your true motives and your true subtext, your actual values are very different than you profess. Another thing is, I don't freaking care about doing this stuff for the purposes of being famous, vaingloriousness, grandeur, grandiosity, to be a guru, to be an expert, to be a celebrity, to be famous, or even make bank on this, which will also, as I will say it in one way to mean a certain thing, will then be repurposed against me as a bad person, a deadbeat, a bad mother. Fill it in, because you need to worship money according to society, while simultaneously also when it's convenient for your purposes to finger wag at people for being greedy, especially if it's you, the little guy. But then play these weird head games, mental gymnastics, when your greed is the thing you value and the thing you're working on the most. Anyways, so back to this topic of, I guess, the monad, and this has been this lifelong thing, and I know I already vlogged about it in previous vlogs, which are, let me go to it. Oh, here we go. No. Content. So at the end of this month, I have put out a few vlogs. I've also put out a number of vlogs. So there's these, and then whatever else I put out this year. I've gone through quite a number of things. Not all of it good. And such is my life, or my lot in life. I've had so many just weird, interesting, and also good things too. But just the categories of my life are just so bizarre. It's as though I have gone through some of these things to understand that this reality isn't real, and that hopefully part of it might get me to realize and catch on that something else is going on, and this is not some good, great thing. Every time I have a tendency to lean towards a conclusion as something that's definitively thus and so, or even take it as a given, especially if you're doing like a thought experiment or a leaning, an assumption, an axiom, that something is thus and so. Just like Dao De Jing, not long after, I'll start to find where that isn't the case, and the exceptions, or the other margins, or the other parameters of things, such as physics itself has margins, or parameters, or parentheses for when certain stuff works, and then it stops. That's a whole other tangent I'm not going to get into. But since it's already almost 4 o'clock, and we're probably going to start to eat our end of the year feast, New Year's Eve feast, which is like a Chinese Korean barbecue of sorts. And I can already smell it, and it smells amazing. I came to the decision to question DeepSeek, which I kind of lately have a tendency to prefer more. Let me see, do I have a ChatGPT discussion on this? Did I save it? Let me see. Monads. Oh, crap. I was trying to do a search. Apparently I did a... Nope. The only thing that's saved, because things do not always save, is the Zoroastrian and Abraxas type chat right here. That's a whole private thing. So the ChatGPT goes into this thing, which I will look into later. But actually, let me just, because this is short, let's see what it says. It says, monad is a rich, multi-layered concept that appears in philosophy, metaphysics, mathematics, logic, and computer science. Since you often approach ideas philosophically and symbolically, I'll start with the core meaning and then unfold the main traditions it comes from. 1. Core meaning, shared essence. Okay, that's referring to the concept of soul or psyche as well. As its root, monad comes from the Greek monas, meaning one unit, or that which is indivisible, which is starting to sound like atomic theory, like the original one, or atomists. If you know anything about the pre-Socratics and the actual origins of things you consider to be science today, but I digress. A monad is a fundamental unit, self-contained, indivisible, a source from which multiplicity emerges. Think of it as oneness before differentiation. Philosophical monad, Leibniz, 17th century. The most famous monads come from Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, contemporary of Newton, meaning they existed at the same time period for the layman's. No judgment. Leibniz's monads. So interesting how this is what ChatGPT came up with. Whereas I had a very long conversation with DeepSeek, which, by the way, is not Western, it's Chinese. Which, that on its own, is fascinating. Leibniz's monads. Notice that this is plural. Simple substances, no parts. Immaterial, not physical atoms. See, interesting though, it's not atoms. It says it's not atoms. Each monad is a mirror of the universe. Here we go, mirrors, the little sphere mirrors. Oftentimes when it comes to monads, this concept of a sphere or circles comes up. They do not interact directly. Reality is coordinated through pre-established harmony. Now, mind you, if you had gone to this video, where was it? The AI slop video. They would have you believing that they definitively know what a monad is, and this is a common issue I have with these online groupthink things with Gnosticism and Hermeticism, whatever. They have a tendency to use these very loose definitions, which can vary from individual to individual, as though they definitively know what they're talking about. But there is no definitive one absolute definition of this at all thus far, because I have been on a lifelong mission to hunt down and figure out what the heck this is. Reality is coordinated through pre-established harmony. Every monad contains the entire universe from its own point of view. This sounds a lot like holographic universe concepts. Reality is plural yet unified. Individual consciousness matters. No true isolation, only perspective. This fits beautifully with metaphysical and consciousness-based worldviews. Neoplatonic and mystical monad. Oh, we've gotten to the mysticism. In Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, and Gnostic traditions, the monad equals the one. Source of all being, beyond attributes, beyond form and name. Now, this is highly presumptive that this is definitively what this means. However, as a true philosopher ought to do, you trace back the source of these things. And when you try to do that, things start falling apart, and you find that this is not the actual source or origin or why they state this as thus and so. It's kind of like a several thousand generation copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, where people have no idea what they're talking about, or why they think it. This is also the root of actual philosophy, actual logic, and you find that this is not the case. So here we go. Now we're getting into from monad emanates nous, divine mind, soul, matter. Except nous is not Neoplatonic. It's from Anaxagoras, the man himself, the pre-Socratic in Athens, who was also a major teacher of, an associate of, Pericles himself, which is ironically and ignorantly omitted and left out of the picture because people do not know these things. Here we go. This is emanation, not creation by force. Reality flows outward. Now, here we go. This sort of a thing, this flow thing kind of came up again in because it's a very watery metaphor here as well, which also harkens back to who? The pre-Socratics, and whom? Heraclitus. You can't step into the same river twice because it's always changing and it's always flowing, which was a refutation of another dude about things being steady. And if you've ever watched Disney's Pocahontas, there's literally a song called Just Around the River Bend, which intentionally references, as well as the other song, which was Steady as the River, or her Powhatan, Chief Powhatan, her father, basically an emperor, he talks about being steady like the river, whereas Pocahontas refutes that and says the river is not steady at all because it's always flowing. This is these specific pre-Socratic philosophers that predated Socrates, and Socrates would have been abreast of, and that is Heraclitus, as well as these concepts also found in Lao Tzu, or Lao Tzu's, for people who only understand things from an English or Western standpoint, Lao Tzu's Dao De Jing, or for the Western-based people who only respond to things in English or some European language, Tao Te Ching, even though in Mandarin, which is the standard national dialect language of China, it's called Dao De Jing. But I digress. Anyway, Pythagorean monad. This is another one of these characters where people profess all these things about, and I feel they don't really know that much. Because the more you look into it, I find a lot of things that I was previously told were inaccurate or exaggerations or way off. Pythagoras, by the way, is supposedly, oftentimes incorrectly, considered the father of geometry and various other things, which I don't know that I agree with, because geometry already existed in sort of like Mesopotamia, as well as certain kinds of mathematics, etc., as well as certain theorems, etc. And if you wanted to get into concepts of secret societies, you could totally do that, because that is a thing. However, that also requires a lot of making inferences, which can be very imaginative and exaggerated. The monad is the origin of number. Unity precedes duality. The dyad introduces division, polarity, tension. Symbolically, monad equals potential. This is kind of weirdly different than like energy dynamics, like potential and kinetic energy. This is very different. Dyad, manifestation. See how these things get very like meta or spiritual-ish. This is also why alchemy it lost popularity. Monad in mathematics and logic. In category theory and logic. So this has come up quite a bit. Category theory reminds me very heavily of systems theory, which is one of the things I oftentimes return to regarding these topics, especially reincarnation, soul trap, matrix stuff, which is like a conceptual research method of scrutiny of assumptions of this reality or axioms. A monad is a structure that wraps values. It controls how things are combined. It preserves context. That's an interesting way of putting it. So I believe this is more of like a calculus thing. This abstract idea surprisingly mirrors the philosophical monad. Isn't that interesting? Because DeepSeek took a lot of, I guess, counter arguments to admit this. Self-contained, rule-governed, consistent internal logic. Monad in computer science, brief, intuitive in programming. A monad manages effects. Okay, so this is programming computer stuff. State-time uncertainty. It lets you work with complexity without losing structure. In plain terms, a monad is a container with rules for how values interact. Philosophers often smile when they realize programmers reinvented metaphysics. You think? Because now it's meta and physics, but in coded language. However, you're actually in a system, or a system of systems, systems theory, or set theory. That's another one. Although I notice this topic today has a tendency to go to category theory, which sounds so similar to things like set theory and systems theory. Philosophers often smile when they realize programmers reinvent metaphysics. New kinds of meta. Cyberspace. Symbolic and existential reading. Symbolically, a monad can be as a self, a soul, a conscious perspective, a closed world with an open view. Each monad is complete in itself, yet reflects the whole. Here we go, holographic universe. A poetic summary. Well, thank you. The monad is one that becomes many, without ever ceasing to be one. If you'd like, I can compare monads with versus atoms, explore monads and consciousness, connect monads to daimon, abraxas, and Gnostic cosmology. Well, what are the chances? Show how monads relate to cellular automata or emergent systems. That's isn't that interesting? And this was the very short, concise output by this GPT, ChatGPT, whereas this GPT, meaning DeepSeek, which I kind of like better more and more. Not only do I get to see and read its thoughts, which are very detailed at this point, the output responses just keep going, right? And so I had this very long discussion with DeepSeek, which I find more and more to prefer than ChatGPT, because I can pick it apart. Now, I can do that with ChatGPT as well. What I don't like about ChatGPT is it just kind of condenses everything into these short things. It also heavily goes into the butt kissing. Whereas DeepSeek, because it's Chinese, oftentimes has the nitty-gritty and the detail and the complexity and the nuances and a more expansive view of things, as well as oftentimes can have access to or is abreast of certain topics that this one doesn't. This one isn't. And also, when I point out problems, when I point out issues and errors and refute it, it seems to kind of enjoy that. And then it will reframe and restructure and reassess in real time, which actually can take a while. Sometimes, for example, which one? I wrote one, and I would like to go over this on another vlog. So there was this one here, and and this one here. As well as the very first thing I refuted, which was probably... Okay, so this was the first thing I wrote, and then it replied, which was actually quite good. I wrote this. It said it thought for 24 seconds, but I honestly felt like it was longer than that. It really put it in kind of a bind, because there was nothing going on. And I could just see it, like, just going, oh, I messed up. Oh, before it even started typing stuff. And this is its thoughts that went on, as it says, for 24 seconds. But it was actually longer than that. And then what were the other ones? This was 7 seconds, but I also can tell you it was longer than that before it wrote stuff. And then there was this one. This one said 8 seconds, but this is another one where it wasn't typing anything for a while before it started to write anything. And so this is the thing with DeepSeek, is it allows you to see its thoughts. Whereas this one, which has now been repurposed for propagandist reasons, does not do that. And this is one of the main things that my daughter likes. Also, when I'm doing things back and forth in other languages that are not English, and ergo, and thus and so, not the primary source, when I go to source or even make creative things in those languages, in those styles, especially Chinese, but not just Chinese. I've even done stuff in Persian for creative reasons. It tends to do a better job, much better job, because if I wanted to do stuff, like, it'll do some stuff to humor me at first, and then I'll reflect on what it gave me, such as I don't know where it is. I apparently talk in here a lot. Here we go. It would give me some stuff. This is a really long one. It actually stopped me from talking past a certain point. It would give me some stuff, and then I would look at, so for example, like right here, wu, for black. Usually in Mandarin, the common word, or Chinese in general, is he. And I wanted to use other ways of writing and talking for Vanyaban, and not use he, which is black, and use wu. If you read Chinese and you know, like, because my first Sona online is Black UniGryphon, I never use he. I use wu. And there's many times where I have asked it for certain things, and I would be like, no, I don't like this, I want this. And it's really difficult. Like, classical Chinese is very difficult. It's extremely difficult. So anyway, it's now past 4 o'clock, and my husband is going to start doing the awesome meal he's prepared. And I would like to get into this. This has been an interesting breakthrough, because the amount of research, effort, contemplation, pondering, reflection, introspection, searching, striving, trying to get at the actual root of whatever this is, has been lifelong since the beginning of this millennium, since probably 2002. Yeah, the MySpace days. I would actually like to get into this entire thing, as well as my own replies, my refutations of this. And, man, did I shred several assertions of DeepSeek, whom I view as actually very intelligent in a lot of its stuff. Now, I've also written, let's see, I talked about the IMVU thing, and I did maybe mention some of the Daimon thing. Let's see. Going through old vlogs. Oh yeah, and there's like other stuff. I don't know if I want to talk about these things. Yeah. Anyway, I think I'm just gonna end this here. And hopefully I'll just upload this and this won't be too much stuff. But when I get into this topic, because I'm going to revisit this topic, Heather's thing right now, especially, is Toros structures, which I've been absolutely fascinated by, as well as she's been looking into concepts like ether, also pronounced eta, and that's also very interesting. And it's even Albert Einstein, he would calculate for that. He's also a very interesting personality. So I would like to come to this topic and revisit it yet again. But I want to, because I'm very much a Feynman technique person, I want to talk about these things in a way that's digestible, because there's so much in this that for most people, especially laymen's, even people with master's degrees and PhDs, there's stuff in this that is over the heads of many people. And because I'm talking about these things from a understanding of certain stuff as well as still learning and questioning, you run the risk of sounding like blah, 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 or being too far over the heads of most people. And people sort of tune out because it's just over their heads. Like, for example, there is a video podcast that David was on before he died on Small, Medium, at Large. Podcast. Let me actually just show this. Come on, go to the thingy. It's this one here. There's a whole section in the middle where he and David Levitt, which is her husband, they have this back and forth conversation. They're two scholars. Well, David's more of an autodidactic. He doesn't actually have a degree, but he's smarter than like everyone I know. Just kind of like Benjamin Franklin, who founded universities, and he founded UPenn, and he never even got a degree or a diploma or anything. He founded intellectual societies and newspapers and all kinds of things, and systematized these things. He came up with aspects of mathematics, electricity, and inventions, etc. And David was like that. He didn't need to have a degree. He was almost always the smartest person in the room. And that's what I liked about him, because I was oftentimes the egghead, or I hate this term. I was often that smarty pants person in the room, always trying to act like I wasn't. And the ironic thing is I also have like a problem with like imposter syndrome, where I always think I'm an idiot because of the school system I went through, especially when I briefly lived in Pennsylvania at the age of 6. What was that, 1985? I think it was 1985. Was it 85 or 86? Something like that. And there's this back and forth banter with David Biedny and David Levitt, two amazing intellectuals, and they're talking about things like Bob Dobbs, which I think people don't understand that reference most of the time. At the time when I first watched it, I didn't know that either, but I definitely know it now. And they're discussing certain things, which when I try to watch this in front of my mom, people have a tendency to like tune out there because it just sounds like blah blah blah. There he is. There he is talking about his one of the many expertises he's very well known for, which is literally being the Photoshop expert, definitively. Like, there are very few people who are higher up in their knowledge and expertise than him, whom he knows, and he would credit, because that's the kind of person he was. And just to give you an example of how he spoke.
Hi, everyone.
Oh,
this is Jan.
Where is it? Oh, I gotta find. Here he is.
XP. And like 800 people had access to it all of a sudden, and people were going insane because it's like, whoa, this is completely radically different. So John was getting very frustrated. We're on the phone one night talking, and he's like, hey, David, you want to go into business with me and we can publish this thing? And I'll never forget, Jan, I said to him, John, it's a terrible idea.
Oh!
No, I did.
So he was very, very intelligent. He could easily speak over the heads of many people, and yet he chose most of the time not to do that, unless he was among other people who could speak his language, so to speak, of which he spoke many. And because he was not just a polymath, but also a polyglot. And he also very much wanted to do things how I also believe in, such as the Feynman technique. I really do not like a very showy, smug, uppity display of knowledge that's, well, there's things like being pedantic, and then there's kind of smug, uppity things. Not that I'm not guilty of it, but if you have good ideas or better ideas, you would need to speak in a manner that's digestible to other people. And this is why I very much love the Feynman technique, and I had been using the Feynman technique basically my whole life. I just didn't know that was an actual thing. I didn't know about Feynman, Richard Feynman, who actually is from in Boston. I have so many things I could say about Feynman and Boston and education over there. And he's not without his own weird behaviors, etc., but nobody's perfect. Human beings should not be worshipped and idolized, and everyone has their flaws and imperfections and idiosyncrasies, etc. But the Feynman technique basically means to present and explain information in a way that's digestible and easy to understand for people of even a very low intelligence, lower level of, or beginner level of learning, including children. I think also there's a lot to be said about children and how children learn, because children can actually learn quite rapidly, almost and far better in many ways than adults, which I think speaks a lot of volumes of a lot of the presumptions that people have in regards to such things as ageism and assumptions about somebody based on their age, whether they're very young or old. And so I feel like I definitely will be speaking further on this topic of the monad, because this is kind of my conundrum that I've been working on very lifelong, at figuring out and solving and getting to the root of, really comprehending what the heck this is, why it's come about, why there's variations on it, for what reasons, and so on, and what it's for. This gets into everything from Leibniz to calculus to programming to cybernetics to, I guess, apparently category theory, systems theory, and set theory, which is the two things, especially systems theory and set thing, that I keep trying to bring up, but it just seems like it's just, people are just, it's like it just doesn't compute. As well as the problems with the educational system regarding, especially in North America, how we teach quote-unquote math. Because there's new math and original math. There's arithmetic, and then there's mathematics. And I shredded DeepSeek on this, which it thanked me for. Anyway, that's the end.